Here.
Great.
Okay.
Here we are.
Yeah. So I'm here today for my show called California Times with John Wright. John, hey, welcome. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing, Guy?
It's good.
Good to see you.
And how are you doing? It's December.
It's December.
Ramping up here.
Yeah. So we have a from a town perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
So we just had an election, and so
Right.
we're fresh off of that.
Yeah.
I was not up this year, but we had a couple of contested seats, and we had a controversial park measure that I was quite involved with that, but disappointingly lost. And that's kind of, we can talk about that if you want to.
Love to.
But it's kind of a little bit of a changing of the guard.
Right.
We have a new councilman coming on next week. Steve Burdo. He's pretty well known in the town because
Will Steve be sworn in next week?
Yes, Steve will be sworn in on the 10th. There'll be the meeting will start, and then all that happens at the beginning of the meeting. And there'll be sort of a thank you to Matt, and then Steve gets sworn in. So that'll be a change. And we had a change in August after Kay Coleman left town and retired off the council after many years of great service. And of course, she's very well known in the town. And we appointed a quite young councilwoman, councilperson, Alexis Feynman, who comes from a family of local politics in Ross. Her father had been on the Ross School Board for a while, so she's bringing a youthful perspective to. She's immediately jumped into some pretty controversial issues since August.
Yeah.
Right? We normally. A lot of meetings are not all that interesting, but she jumped into a couple of them that had quite a bit of controversy. Cannabis, notably.
I look forward to
the biggest one.
Hopefully having a conversation with her right here too.
Yeah. So it's kind of things will slow down.
Right.
Maybe the December meeting. Well, there'll be some things going on, but things will slow down until January, and then we'll start up again. But it was a pretty busy. It's been a pretty big year with a lot of changes on the council and some issues confronting the town. But I'm just kind of recovering from the holidays are not even, they're barely started, but I'm already kind of recovering from them.
We've gone through the first round.
We got the first round over, and
sort of the eye of the storm a little
That's
bit. We
correct.
get to breathe for about coming to an end probably.
Bit, yeah. And things will be slow. We have a staff party, I guess the week after next at the fire station, and that's always kind of fun. So it's a family atmosphere with the town, and the town staff is we have a good relationship with town staff and the council. So it's a fun. What we do is there's an element of fun. Some of it's not particularly, but it's interesting.
Well, it's for anybody viewing from afar who isn't familiar with this town or Marin County politics.
Sure.
San Anselmo is a beautiful little town about 20 miles north of San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge.
Sure. Right.
And it's almost you don't want to say too many positive things about it. I don't want to give people too many ideas about rushing over here. But it's a great little town, and it hasn't grown
That's right.
too much in 40 or 50 years.
I think that's right.
Which is unusual for California.
I just looked up the population the other day for something. It's around 13,000. I didn't go back in time, but I don't think it's really changed very much for quite a while. There's a lot of there's turnover. You get older people beginning to move out and younger people coming in, but there's not a lot of growth.
It's like an anomaly, really, for compared to much of California.
Right, like a lot of Marin, it's a bit, particularly out here in the Ross Valley. It seems a bit frozen in time, which a lot of people like that, right? Because if you can escape the traffic on 101 and get out here, local traffic is not great, but once you're off the peak times, it's peaceful, right? So it's like you've gone back in time. And I moved out here with my wife and 3 kids it was 1990, I guess. So it's now been 29 years, I guess.
Time flies.
Yeah. So my wife knew the area a bit because my sister-in-law had lived in Fairfax for a long time. And so we liked the weather out here. We were in San Francisco, and it was kind of cold and windy all the time. And we had 3 boys, and it was just a lot easier to raise kids and do all that here. And they all went to public school, and Boyd Thomas and White Hill and Drake High School. And I got my start really with local politics through the school. That was my main kind of point.
School board or something?
Yeah, school board in the early '90s with school foundation for Ross Valley, school tax and bond campaigns, and so I was on the Ross Valley, San Anselmo, Fairfax school board for 5 years. I was appointed, and then I ran in 1995. And then got off that in '99 and was asked to run for the Tam High School board, the high school district for all of Southern Marin, and that was in the year 2001, I guess it was. Yeah, no, was it 2000? I think it was 2001. And so I was on that board for 12 years, and so I spent 17 years on school boards because my kids were still in the schools, right?
What were you doing? What was your career at this same time?
I'm retired now. I'm retired. I'm still a lawyer until my state bar license. I may not renew it next year, but I was a lawyer at Wells Fargo Bank.
Oh, really? Working for the bank itself?
Yeah, directly for the bank. And so I would commute to downtown San Francisco, and first bus and then ferry. And I started to work at home more at the end, but. I was, happy to leave all of that. And
seems like a classic kind of California, even Marin County lifestyle in so many ways.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think things are different now in many respects, but that worked out well. For us, it was a bit of a commute. The traffic wasn't as bad in those days, and that changed for the worse, over that period of time. But so it was a long commute, but you'd come back here, and as you say, it was a very, very charming, small town, kind of family oriented, with a lot of activities for people to do, and many opportunities for volunteers, and schools.
When did you run for election? And what term are you serving now?
Well, for the schools it was '95, and then I ran in 3 other elections on the high school board. One was contested, 2 were not. When I decided to leave the high school board, that was 2013, and I was interested in continuing, in public service, but my kids were all out of the schools, and so there was a couple of town council openings, that year, and so I decided to put my name in 2013, and I already knew the town very well because I think I'd worked quite a lot with town staff, because the sort of signature project that I was involved in was the Red Hill Field construction. There's a small sign there that says John Wright Field. Wow, very small sign.
I didn't
but
know
it's
that.
there,
Well,
and that was a big project that I was heavily involved in for quite a long time, starting on the school board, and then and there was.
Is this? Excuse my naivety, but is this part of Memorial Park? Then?
No, it's not. It's the property that is directly behind the Red Hill Shopping Center. And it's a big soccer field, is what it is.
Right.
It's a big soccer field, although you also have baseball. And
right. The dog.
Well, there's a dog.
That was a controversy.
Well, at the time, but there is a dog park there.
Okay.
It's kind of a smaller portion of that property, but that property is actually owned by the high school district.
Yes.
And so, but it was developed and so it's technically an athletic field for Drake High School. But getting to that was a very long project that I was heavily involved in, and there was involvement from the town. And when we were building all of that, or getting all that done, which would have been the mid-2000s, there was a committee set up with people from the high school district and from the town, a couple of town council members and school board members. I was still on the school board, and that sort of oversaw the construction of that, or the fix-up of that field. I mean, it was just a bunch of dirt, basically, because it was a abandoned athletic field. It used to be.
It wasn't being used as a dog park.
Well, it was right. It was a vacant lot.
It was a nice it could have been like
Yeah.
a soccer field or
Yeah,
for
right.
anything
That's right.
youth in
Yeah.
days gone by would have brought their gloves and baseball
Sure,
perhaps,
yeah,
but we already had
in
did
days,
baseball
in
done.
days, right,
Yeah.
long ago. But,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that was my entree into town politics, basically.
What was that, was there something that spurred you besides your just general feeling satisfaction at being involved to being throwing your hat in the ring for the council? Was there anything that was like,
I would say not. I would say that I never had an agenda,
yeah,
and that in any my public service. So it was really more. I was interested in helping the community. I felt I knew a lot about the issues already. That particular year, 2013, was also the year that we successfully passed the sales tax measure for San Anselmo to provide money for roads primarily. So a lot of the tremendous amount of paving and work has been done on streets and roads since 2013, so I was involved in that. But the reason I decided to do that was, again, a sense of public service, kind of meeting interesting people, working with people on things that would help the community. So that was my main motivation, and it really still is.
Now, so you are in your second term now?
Yeah, so this is my second term, right? So the 2013 was a 4-year term. This is the second year of a 3-year term, because we're changing. We have to conform to the state law changes that are making all the local elections go in even years, because the turnout is so low typically. And so my term currently is only a 3-year term. So if I decide to run again, it'll be a 4-year term. And like the term that was just, Ford was just reelected, Ford Green, to a 3-year term, because they alternate, right? And so the 3-year terms all end, the first set of 3-year terms end all next year, and then the second set start this year. But eventually they'll all be 4-year terms. But this is my second term, yeah. But it's been a interesting process. A lot of you have a lot of interaction with people in other towns. That's another aspect of this.
Is that something that took you a little bit by surprise?
No,
when
I
you
knew
came on
that.
the board?
No,
You were kind of aware
I knew
of lots
that.
of the
Sure, I knew
workings.
that because of the time I'd already been on the school boards, right? So I knew that in fact, even much more so than the schools, because the school districts tend to be pretty autonomous, and there's not really a lot of interaction between different school boards, but there's a lot of interaction between different town councils. For example, not every month, but 8 or 9 months out of the year, there's a monthly meeting of all the different town council members from around the county. It's a public meeting, so occasionally other people show up, but there are speakers come to talk about issues of more regional interest, I guess. And so you end up meeting a lot of people from some of the
Is that, are you referring to what Matt told me was the
MCCMC?
That's what you're referring to?
Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members.
That did seem interesting.
That's
we
right.
Gotta,
That's a whole level of so the service on the town council is not just going to town council meetings, right? So there's a whole set of regional boards or local boards. I'll give you a couple of examples. Police and fire, for example. We have cooperative agencies with other communities. The fire or the police, for example, is Corte Madera, Larkspur, and San Anselmo are all part of the same police force.
Right, so and that is a rarity in California.
That is.
And
that
in
is.
Fact, we're like the
it's
only 2 communities in all of California that do
I
that.
believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And
sure, there's some questions about that.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that a little bit. I mean, and fire is similar. It's Ross and Sleepy Hollow and San Anselmo and Fairfax are all part of the Ross Valley Fire District.
Right, but Ross and Ross, Fairfax, and San Anselmo.
Yeah, and the Sleepy Hollow part of the county.
Okay, right. What you're saying, unincorporated.
But what's interesting, and those are separate meetings. We have 2 council members on the fire board and 2 council members on the police board. Police council. I've done police since I've gone on. And so that's another set of meetings that occur outside the scope of the town council.
Right.
And then you have other groups like, Transportation Authority of Marin, Marin Clean Energy. There's things that are more Sacramento oriented, so there's a lot of other things.
Which one is Sacramento oriented? What do you think when you said that?
The League of California Cities.
Is that another organization?
Is another organization
Wow.
that has kind of a regional committee that typically one person from the council. It's not. That's been Matt actually, and so that somebody from the council will go to those meetings. Those, I think they meet every month or so. So there's a whole other set of things that you do outside the town council.
Which committees are you specifically right at this term
currently
assigned to? On the external ones?
Yeah, well, on the external one, the principal one is police. I'm on the police council. The other, the only, Ford and I, this is actually, there's an internal committee that I've been on with Ford that deals with the garbage contract, which is coming up for renewal. The other main community activity that I do that is not, it's not appointed by the council, in other words, so it's really like a nonprofit. I'm the co-chair of something called the Marin Healthy Youth Partnership. It used to be the Marin Healthy Youth Coalition, which is oriented toward healthy lifestyles for youth. It's not entirely, it's to some extent kind of alcohol, drug abuse related. It's not all about that. But so I'm involved in that group.
What is it? Is it overarching goal or plan?
It runs on a couple of grants, a grant from the county and a grant from the federal government for drug-free communities. So it's basically aimed at public education and parent education and youth education about the risks of drug use. I mean, it's not. It's trying to orient. We have a quite high usage rates among kids. We're talking about 18 and younger now.
The whole country does.
Talking about what the adults do. Right? So this is really trying to mitigate some of the pretty high use rates for alcohol, nicotine, vaping is a big thing right now, and cannabis for young people. Right, and so that's in addition to the police council work that I do. That's probably my biggest additional activity that is not strictly related to the council, although the council did, San Anselmo and Fairfax did put in some seed funding to this organization a few years ago, but not right now.
And it's made up of people beyond the council?
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh sure. Yeah, in fact, there's only one other. I'm the only elected official on it at this point. We had somebody else from Corte Madera until recently, but the other co-chair is a former high school board member. But other people are, community members, people in the medical profession, people in recovery people that are involved with business groups and that sort of thing.
So it does seem like it's anybody who's taking on, it's like to throw their hat in the ring to become a council member.
There's more to
this
it.
town or any town here in Marin County need to be fully aware that there are responsibilities that go beyond appearing on the council.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Are you folks compensated for a appearance at a?
The only one that's compensated. Well, the only one that I think the only one that's compensated, I believe, is the fire board, and there's a stipend of I think a couple $100 a month or something. Police is not. I don't think the other ones are that I've seen. I haven't been on the other ones. The Transportation Authority in Marin and the Marin Clean Energy.
You haven't been on those in the previous term?
No. Because typically, usually what happens on those is that a particular council member is. I forgot. Actually, I forgot another one that I'm involved in because it hasn't met for a few months. The flood control district. Right.
Wow.
So, advisory board of the advisory board for Flood Zone 9, which is the Ross Valley district here. So I'm the vice chair of that, and we haven't had a flood since earlier last year, so it wasn't on top of mind. But that's another.
It's interesting.
External.
It's interesting because a lot of these committees or commissions, what would you call them, committees or the commissions?
Well,
What is the right term? Is there a
well,
right-
it depends. I mean, some are boards, you know, some are councils, some are
Okay.
commissions. It sort of depends on which one it is.
Do you think this is a relatively new evolution of local government? Something that's like 25 years ago, back in the 80s, that wouldn't have been around
Yeah,
and all this stuff?
I would, to some extent. I think if you were to look 25 or 30 years ago, you didn't have everybody did their own police.
Right.
Everybody did their own fire.
Right.
Although the fire district has been around for several decades at this
Right.
point, but if you went back 30 or 40 years, yeah, everybody was just doing their own thing. And it's a good thing that more evolution has occurred, because a lot of there's a lot of inefficiencies, despite the fact that people love having their local districts. It's very expensive to have all these different.
Well, I think a lot of evolution just happens sort of, well, like just the stream trying to find the course that moves directly.
Well, I think some of it was driven, frankly, by cost, economic issues, because particularly, you had the recession of 2008, 2009, which really hit some of the small towns quite bad, right? Because we don't have a lot of sales tax revenue to begin with, but property tax was shaky, and so you had financial issues, I think, that were sort of pushing different towns to do these things.
It's interesting.
There's a big cost savings.
When Steve Burdick comes in to take the oath, a little oath, I assume is going to be administered. It's not like he's swearing to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Is it like a symbolic thing?
No, it is all that.
Is that all that included? All right,
and the
that's
state
good.
of
That's
California
wonderful.
and the whole thing, right?
And San Anselmo.
Well, it doesn't say anything about San Anselmo.
No.
It just talks about it.
Well, I'm just wondering, because I'm just wondering if there is, in this broad approach that we seem to have reached ourselves in this modern world that we're living in, if you or our elected officials are now being even more than the San Anselmo council person. We're now being representing the county in a way.
I would say,
curious.
no, I think that's true in part. I think, because I think, realistically, many of the towns have the same interests, right? And there's really not a lot of difference between, the differences between San Anselmo and Fairfax and San Rafael and Ross are really not all that significant on most issues, right? Everybody's got the same problems.
Right, but we don't want a Ross person ruling on San Anselmo issues or vice versa.
That depends. We're ultimately, as a practical matter, on issues like, let's take police and fire. Okay, the decisions about police and fire are made. They're not really made by the town council. They're made by the police council, right? But there's an agreement between the three towns, right? And if the town council doesn't like it, you can pull out of it. It would be expensive to do that. But as a practical matter, decisions about policing in San Anselmo are made by a body of 6 people, 2 of whom are from Larkspur and 2 of whom are from Corte Madera. Now, does that matter to people? It hasn't in the time that I've been on that. I mean,
only 2.
A few people.
Couple of people.
Yeah, well, people, on police, people say, well, they're not as accessible. I mean, the office is open, to some extent there, but you don't see as many police around, perhaps. There's no real data to support that. A lot of that is sort of anecdotal. I mean, people have memories about certain things. The data we do have indicates that, crime and traffic and all, the crime certainly is down significantly. I'm not saying it's due because of the consolidation. It's a macro issue.
I didn't remember it ever being.
Well, I mean, the crime it wasn't very high to begin with, right? But on property crimes or things that might happen. So, there may be fire as another example. But again, fire, even more so than police, is surely a regional issue, right? Because if you have everybody's got mutual aid agreements anyway, right? So
let's get into the police thing, because this is an issue of mine that I say issue of mine, but it was when it transpired when the move happened for San Anselmo to decide to join the Twin Cities,
Yeah.
Corte Madera and
Right.
Larkspur. It struck a bone in my body that it felt like we were losing something in terms of our sort of a direct line of responsibility between the Democratic elected community
Yeah.
and guys with guns on their hips. You know,
Sure.
wonderful guys and gals, you know, lot of training, etc. But we would no longer have the power of, though I don't even know if we had that, because maybe that goes back into, we have a town manager, of getting on the phone and saying, Chief, what just happened?
Well, I can tell you my experience is that communication is all still there.
Do you?
The chief, this chief and our previous chief, and I didn't know the one before that, I found very responsive to the community. And the current one, Mike Morton, is from San Anselmo.
Okay.
And so these are, I've not heard of any examples in the 6 years that I've been doing the police council thing of some community members saying, oh, you know, the police are not responsive in a way that would have differed had it just been the local police. I think it's perception.
Well,
I think it's perception.
you know, first I want to, you know, make clear that in my mind that I met Chief Cusimano, a wonderful guy.
Right.
I think I've say hello to many of the men and women who are part of the force, and I think everybody has nothing but, you know, the best intentions of providing service and what they're doing.
Right.
But I still question that sign off on this deal that we did. I think was it back in 2005 or 6 or something like that?
Yeah, it was a couple of years before. The San Anselmo joined. I think it would have been. Don't quote me on the exact year. It was a couple of years before my time. So it was certainly before. It was I think 2011, 2010, somewhere around in that vicinity. So it's less than 10 years, I think, at this point. Well less at this stage. But to me, again, I've had virtually no complaints, you know, directed to me at least about those kind of issues. I mean, there was some concern earlier this year. Actually, we had a workshop that was reasonably well attended for these things in last January about traffic issues. I guess it would have been. I mean, concerns about speeding and enforcement, and there had been some accidents and all that, and it was, you know, there was some. It was, the police had, you know, chief was there, his chief deputy was there, town manager was there. It was about a 3-hour meeting, and, you know, concerns were heard and actions were taken, right? So I don't see any evidence that it's not a very responsive, you know, police department.
So generally the Central Marin Police have, because we've joined with 2 towns that are not adjacent to our town.
Correct.
So there's like
it's a
3 mile
substation. You know, they have a substation here.
Right. So there are police 24 hours a day in San Anselmo?
Not necessarily in the station, but they'd be driving around, right? I mean, there are patrols here, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and there's always mutual aid, right? So if there's what happens if there's anything.
But if a Central Marin police officer he gets an emergency call, his sirens are wailing maybe from Greenbrae or maybe from Larkspur to come up to San Anselmo.
Potentially.
Anyway,
But
it could happen.
But it could, hasn't.
And it does.
People, I think generally people have been pretty happy, and more, and beyond that, we're saving $1 million in the budget. Yeah. It's not insignificant.
When the incident at the United Market, outside the United Market in the springtime, with the gentleman who ended up being found dead, who had committed suicide, the shots were heard. We think of that as our police force, correct? I mean, we're right to think of it as that we should have a sense of ownership.
Definitely.
So I heard that there were, it was a major SWAT kind of appearance with many
from outside of
many
Central Marin, I
came
imagine. Sure,
together.
Santa Fe, probably, and some others, right?
And there is a, forgive me if this sounds too paranoid, but there is was the armored car that showed up, is that the part of our town or was that the county's?
We don't, Central Marin doesn't have an armored car, so I think that was probably coming from the sheriff or Santa Fe, I'm not sure. I was out of town when all that happened, so I knew that it happened, but I didn't really hear much about it later.
Yeah.
But Central Marin doesn't have an armored car, so again, it's mutual aid from larger jurisdictions that have more equipment than some.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how the evolution of our world and our community, how something like that would have been handled 20 years ago versus how it's handled now with an armored car and 100 guys with SWAT jackets lining up.
I think that evolution, I don't think would have anything to do with local police. I mean, that's happening regardless, I think. I mean, those trends have occurred, whether or not you have, individual police departments. Ross has kept its police department.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Fairfax has as well.
Fairfax has as well.
College and Marin Police
are
or also invited to join the regional force.
Right.
They declined.
Right.
The three other communities did.
Right.
All right. Well, it's interesting. And you say the meetings take place once every 2 months.
Those particular the police council meetings are, unless there's a special meeting, those are quarterly. Those are quarterly meetings.
Quarterly.
Yeah. The fire board meets more frequently. They're giving them a stipend to do that. But there's a lot more, for whatever reason. Well, maybe it's explicable, understandable right now. There's a lot more fire issues these days than there are police issues, as a practical matter, because of all the things that have happened. And there's a service. We get the chief is the county chief, right? So
the fire department, Jason
Weber, right? So there's a shared services agreement with the county for Ross Valley, and so the fire board has been quite busy, much more so than the police issues. There really have not been a lot of significant police issues. Consolidation occurred, there's occasional budget discussions, very few, they're public meetings, very few public members, ever attend. So it's been that the police issues have been pretty calm, I think, compared to fire.
Right.
And I think to go back to those other agencies that are so significant, probably the most significant one, in my opinion, of those regional ones, in terms of. And you asked about, are people making decisions that people from other jurisdictions are making decisions about what happens in San Anselmo? Well, that's true in a lot of issues. The police and fire, I think, are more of greater concern to people because they're public safety issues, right? But on transportation issues, we have a regional agency, a Marin agency, Transportation Authority of Marin, that controls a pretty good amount of money, right? Because there's a transportation tax in Marin, and they're doling that out, in different ways. And so that one has a pretty big impact, I would say, on people's day to day, because they're providing for safe routes to schools, for traffic guards to sort of try to encourage kids to walk to school and that sort of thing. So there's quite a few things going on the traffic front that are all regional, right? The San Anselmo controls most of its roads. The Sir Francis Drake is kind of a regional thoroughfare, so the money for that tends to come from the state. But so Public Works is dealing with the condition of the roads, but traffic is really, that's one of people's biggest issues is traffic, and yet the town government, we have very little influence over traffic in San Anselmo. We can add or subtract traffic lights, I guess, if we want to, right? But in terms of the level of traffic, issues around public transportation or encouraging people to use other forms of transportation, those are regional issues, right? And so there's really not a lot that the town, we don't tend to deal, we talk about them because people will come and raise concerns, but the action on that is really much more at the regional level.
Well, that is interesting, because it is kind of sort of. I think I've been told that I live in some kind of sometimes impractical world where like small town, people being responsible or responsive to that town.
Mm-hmm.
So even now, just as a frequent bus commuter,
Mm-hmm.
I see that a number of bus. Have you heard about the little switching of the bus routes in town? Is this something that's filtered down to the town council from?
We haven't, not, you mean the Golden Gate ones, it's like the 24 and the 27?
Well, I guess
and
it's
all
both agencies, both
Yeah.
the Marin Transit and the Golden Gate Transit are
Yeah.
simultaneously moving some of their bus routes away from the hub bus stop
I didn't know.
and creating a new bus stop on Bank Street.
I
So
have not heard that.
it's sort of, I scratched my head over that thought. Do they think they're saving an extra minute by
Yeah.
having buses not make the go-round there? And
Yeah,
what that would do to any poor person who just chose,
Well,
thinks
I
they're
know
gonna
they've
get.
been, I know they've been changing a lot of routes, but in answer to your question, we don't, actually, those topics don't tend to come to the town council
Right.
much at all.
Because it's regional.
Well, it's regional, right,
Yeah.
and now, you know, there are people, the Marin Transit has, there's a board of the Marin Transit, and some of those, and there are individual town council members, not from all the towns, right, but there's a certain number of, so getting back to that MCCMC group that Matt mentioned, that group actually, itself elects different town council members to some of these organizations, to some of these other boards, Marin Transit being one, right, so, you know, I don't think there's been a San Anselmo person on the Marin Transit board that I can remember. Now, maybe there was in the past, but I'm not aware. I think there's only like a couple of seats in any event, right? So.
Well, does that give them an opportunity to feel like they've already communicated with the towns? They no longer, let's say 20 years ago, they might have sent a representative to the town and said, hey, we're rearranging the routes. This is now going to be the hub bus stop. It's not going to be the central bus stop of San Anselmo. We're dividing it up between two bus stops. It appears to be the case.
Possibly.
Like 5 different
I would
routes.
just say that I'm unaware that that has occurred.
Well,
right?
it's like a silly element that you can find so many things that like question in your mind.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but I suspect it's probably always been that way,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's nothing really new about that.
Yeah.
It's just that I
Yeah.
mean, there's always all of these agencies are, you know, they're in theory completely transparent, but you know, most of them when they have meetings, nobody comes, right? And that's kind of a problem we have too. I mean, very little. You know, the whole issue of public engagement. Well, now of course people can do it on the TV. I mean, they can watch it on the internet.
Well, maybe this helps.
Yeah, a little bit. But you know, and there's been some controversy. You know, for example, with the water district about not, you know, they don't televise or even video record their meetings. They may audio record them, I guess. But there was a, you know, that's more. But San Anselmo does a very good job of that, I think, in terms of being our council. In our planning commission, for that matter, you know, that you can watch them pretty much live, right? And there's video and audio and the whole thing. So we're pretty. Maybe that's why people don't come, because they can just sit home and watch it if they want to.
I don't know how many do, and I wonder. I think people are. I think it maybe goes back to your connection with the drug use in high schools, and I think that the sense of even climate. Greta, the whole world. What do you tell your grandchildren? You know, what is our vision? Where are we going? And is this continual evolution to more and more things being regionalized or taken out of little communities' hands? Is it a benefit? You know, if you were to step back and try to look in the long range, where are we going? I question whether I think it needs to be reined in myself. I feel like it's sort of gone a little too far. Right. What do you know about the Sacramento housing bills and stuff like that? Are you connected to that?
I follow that to some extent. What's interesting in San Anselmo, and I was saying that I thought our issues were similar, which I think they are to a large extent with, say, Fairfax. But in Fairfax, for whatever reason, housing and development has been way more controversial than San Anselmo. So we just, for whatever reason, we just don't have the level of controversy. Now, there's controversy on individual buildings where the neighbor is upset at a neighbor because they're blocking their view or something like
One
that.
house at a time is not
But
necessary.
there's so little development in San Anselmo. You mentioned earlier, there's practically no growth, right?
Yeah.
We've had the number of multi-unit buildings that have been proposed in the 6 years that I've been on the council. I think there's probably been about 2 or 3. I mean, there's nowhere to build, right? I mean, there's a few going on right now that are a little controversial, but we just don't have the same. It's just not. There's nowhere to put anything in San Anselmo, and so we don't have big developers coming in. Now they might.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking.
The state law. Well, yeah,
The state is trying to grease the tracks for that to happen.
The state is trying to give developers the right to do more in locations that are close to transit. Right now, they haven't started that yet in San Anselmo. Will they at some point? I'm not sure that San Anselmo is all that great a place to build something like that.
I think it might be perfect with the right developer and the
Well,
right money behind, because you have the hub,
Yeah.
which would probably be the
But
criteria.
I guess now is that a good or bad thing? I guess it depends on the proposal, right? Because if it's scaled correctly or whatever. Am I in favor of that or not? I don't really know, because I think there's some good things about the state legislation, because I do think that, if we're going to be serious about increasing the housing stock, then, you just can't allow, small towns to hold on to their lack of interest in changing, right? I mean, they just.
Well, now wait a minute. Now that's interesting.
No, if you're really serious, where else are you going to? What are you going to do?
Repeat that statement.
If you're really serious about housing, adding housing stock, you have to. Small towns have to be willing to give up.
Cannot be allowed to
hold on entirely, let's say, to their small town character, right? They're going to have to change. They're going to have to change.
They're going to have to change.
They're going to have to
whether
change.
they like it or not.
Whether they like it or not.
And who is that saying that? Who is this grand authority that says that?
Well, we live in a state that has elected representatives. It's a democratic system, right?
Right.
And the legislature, we have representatives in Sacramento, and decisions get made in Sacramento. There needs to be a balance, obviously, with local control, right? But it can't be. You can't build a wall around every little small town and say, we don't want any change here. I don't think. I mean, that's just my personal view, because the result of that is, why do you think prices are going up so much? My kids can't afford to live in these towns.
Well,
There's no
going up so much because there's a flood of wealth being funneled into the Bay Area.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of it. But there's also very little supply, right? I mean, at least in this area, right? I mean, it's happening. The sprawl is happening.
But
in the space.
Again, back to our early talk, this little idyllic little town that sort of missed out on the development of California. Is this the future of California, that you will not be allowed to have your small town, quote, vision?
Well,
you simply will not be allowed to.
It's not quite as. It's not. I don't. It's nuanced. It's a little bit. It's more nuanced in the sense that change is going to occur. It should occur, but how is it really? How big a change is it?
Is it even necessary? Is it just a foolish attempt with developers teaming up with?
Well, it's not really developers. It's affordable housing. I mean, Fairfax was fighting Victory Village, which is an affordable housing setup.
From what I understand, what it looks like is a climate disaster just in the making. And but anyways,
people have to live somewhere.
They do have to live somewhere.
Right.
So, but I do want to kind of get back into this sense of community rights. This sense, once upon a time, this was something that seem like a worthy or almost a natural, what should we say, part of the American heritage, or what it meant to have a community, to have local elected officials. And I guess you could see that battle go on versus state rights versus federal, and we can say, well, the federal government has a greater right because it's everybody to enforce states to do this, and the states likewise, since they have a. But I'm just, to me, I feel like we are going against nature. Did you read the reports that California has the lowest population birth rate stats since recorded history of California in terms of the change in the last few years?
Oh, you mean
people are stopping having babies?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, that's probably not unique to California, right? I imagine.
And it's not unique to California. It's going across the board of the USA.
Right. Well,
and then you got
so expensive.
And then you got the demographics of the age group.
Sure.
All these people with silver in their hair and their beards, like 50–60%.
But just to be clear, you know, what I don't like about Sacramento is one size fits all. Right? So I don't want one size fits all. But I also believe that local communities do need to be willing to change in a balanced way, right? So and that might, but again, it's not a black or white thing that you say, okay, all of a sudden it's all going to be some big monstrosity. There are these proposals, but to answer your original question, we haven't had that controversy in San Anselmo because we have not had development proposals that have generated any particular controversy. I mean, there've been smaller ones. There've been a few.
They will come.
They will come. But you know, how they play out, I don't know. Maybe if somebody designs them correctly, even though it might be an extra floor or something like that, it might be perfectly fine. So I can't sit here and say it's a bad thing that there would be pressure, on the local community to change. I don't know because I haven't seen the specific proposal. Maybe people complain a lot about the lack or the problems with local business and small business. Well, there's no foot traffic, right? Because there aren't enough people living, near enough to downtown to generate any level of activity, right? So if you look at the whole part of Lower San Anselmo Avenue, between from the Ross town border to Ross Avenue, which is Lower San Anselmo Avenue with the post offices and all that, there's vacant lots, there's low buildings. You could have a whole line of nicely designed 2 or 3 story sort of mixed residential commercial that would be could aesthetically be very nice and bring a lot more people downtown. So there's some good things to change like that too. I mean, the change has been so slow.
I disagree. I think
you do.
It's okay.
But that's why we have a system where we have different opinions.
Yeah.
But we haven't really had that debate in San Anselmo because there hasn't been anything. The planning commission or the planning department has had on occasion. And they're supposed to be running these changes to the general plan and visions and vision for the future and all that. And we've had some workshops like that, but nobody comes because it's too abstract for people. So until you have an actual proposal where somebody comes in and says, "I want to build this, and it's going to be this big." Look at San Rafael, right? People just aren't engaging, right? It's to have an abstract discussion about what should the height limits be, or what should the density bonuses be, and all that. You might come, and a few other people, but it just it's not that engaging to people.
I wouldn't want to come, but I feel like the elements of the conversation based on the right of a community to set its own zoning standards, I think is really a fundamental issue that just you and I talking about it right now may be good for somebody else to run through their brain too, and to ponder it and to think about it.
Yeah.
And to me, it would be a natural. It would be like it's sort of like almost like eminent domain.
Yeah.
Eminent domain is something that I wish wasn't even legal
Sure.
in this country. I mean, like, you know, if you want that son of a gun to live at his,
Sure, right.
let him do it, live his life out.
Yeah.
I think the ecological issues and the liberty issues are all combined in our world, and it is.
Well,
interesting.
I also tend to be. I'm known for being kind of a pragmatist
Right.
and a realist, and not an idealist.
Yeah.
And the pragmatic, realistic part of me says there's not much we can do about it because we're just, you know, local small towns don't have the clout. They have some pretty good clout, right? But you know, Newsom wants housing. Democrats control the legislature, and there's not much. The people aren't going to lose. People aren't going to be crying over some small town in Marin that says, "Oh, you know, poor things." Right? You're losing your small town character. And you come out to San Anselmo, it's the whitest town in the Bay Area. That statistic came out last year. The least diverse town in the entire Bay Area. Right? Should we be proud of that? I don't know. But why is that? Well, partly, in my view, it's because, you know, we're very restrictive about change, right? We're not biased against people. But
I don't know. You know, I mean, I don't know if
I think they're related.
I mean, certainly there's.
But getting back to the realism, there's nothing much we can do about it, right? I mean, many of these laws have already been passed, right? And so we just don't. We haven't seen the outcomes yet because, as I mentioned, I'm not sure that from a developer's perspective, you disagreed with me on this, but I don't know that from a developer's perspective, San Anselmo is all that great a place, right? Because it's just not, there aren't enough places to build where it would be worth building. You could, small things, yeah, but not like what they're doing in San Rafael, right? You're not going to see I doubt you would see a 6-story apartment building in the middle of downtown. It would be, could that happen? I don't know, maybe, but I just don't know. The economics are not there.
Well, one of the wealthiest communities in America, Marin County in general, is looked upon as one of the wealthiest. I mean,
Sure.
Actually, I don't even want to say these things because I feel like I'm encouraging the possibility of it all happening. But you know, any commercial building in San Anselmo with a little grease from Sacramento that says your local communities no longer have the right to say this because it's near a transit hub. You know, let's say Alon Fitness or something along Greenfield, or in tear it down and build a 6-story thing. Yeah. Well, who is to stop you? It's a brilliant idea. You know.
Well, I don't know that 6 stories is what would be allowed. I know. Again, I
but
think
they're making laws to say that they're hoping to make a law that says that 8 stories is something that
I don't know this. I don't know what would be in sense on that part. But because, as I say, those discussions have not yet occurred yet. Yeah. They will eventually.
You know what? I'm taking this too much into one zone, and I want to apologize, even to the listeners here, because there's other things to talk about, and we're probably running out of a little bit running out of
topics. You want to
wrap up with Memorial Park, where that got left.
Okay, sure.
What do you think is going to happen now?
Oh, I don't know. It was disappointing. What happened with Measure M. The park definitely needs work. Where do we go from here? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, probably what will happen, I was going to say probably, is that the town will spend what limited money it has to just sort of patch things up a bit. There's a few grants around and kind of a budget of money that was sort of saved up to augment the measure had it passed. So I think there'll be some small amounts of patch work done. Tennis courts will remain the way they are. That's not going to be. They're just not going to get fixed up because we don't have the money. I think it'll be a very limited amount of work, and that'll last maybe a few years, and then more work will be needed, right? So what was proposed was really a complete restoration, not to change anything, but to just restore it all to sort of to more current standards. But I don't think taxpayers want to pay for it, to be honest. And I get that because there's a lot of tax fatigue with all the other tax measures around, right? And so people are looking at this and saying, well, it's a new tax. I don't use Memorial Park. Maybe my kids did, or I don't have the same connection to it as I used to, I don't want to pay the $98, right? So,
What's the budget? It looks pretty good, doesn't it? The annual San Anselmo budget was
oh, the judge
surplus?
Well, the budget, the San Anselmo, the town budget is, we're in decent shape. You know, we're not having to cut anything in particular.
It's not, you don't have an abundance of money.
No,
You can't take on an extra person in the parks department?
No. In fact, I mean, we're trying to keep staffing kind of the same. So, you know, the budget is reasonably balanced at this point, but what we don't have a lot of money for are capital improvements, you know, and this is typical of almost every small town, you know, because people, these towns are old, right? And so there's a lot of deferred maintenance work on buildings and parks and roads and things like that because it's not new. I mean, if you were out in Dublin or Pleasanton or something like that, it's completely different. But it's just very expensive to do all that work, and all we can really afford to do is sort of a patchwork.
Every 20 years, put a new measure to repair things.
Well, for roads, I think, yes. But getting back to the question, what's going to happen in the park? It'll probably be a very limited piecemeal thing. I mean, if some other group of people wants to come forward with a plan, be my guest. But I'm sort of done with it because it was kind of just too frustrating, I think, to sort of deal with that. That's where we are.
Yeah, interesting. It's. Do you feel it was a pretty resounding defeat?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the one criticism, there were obviously things going on that, you know, to lose by that magnitude, obviously there were many factors here. But somebody might hear this in the future. One critique I would make of the opposition was that they didn't let us know about the opposition until the very end, and had they come earlier, the guys that opposed it, Crute and Chignell, former council members, if they had come to us at any point before this ever got put in the measure, we would have changed it. We would have scaled it back, but we didn't. We literally did not know. In fact, we thought that there wasn't going to be opposition, or there was not going to be any opposition, based on conversations that one of them had with the town manager, literally the day before the ballot arguments were due. So it was a bit of an ambush, I'll use that word, right? It's kind of a strong word, but had they actually reached out to us at any point earlier, we would have, and as it was, I mean, we were working on this for 2 years, right? So it wasn't as if it was a secret.
One of those open type of sessions where
absolutely. There were multiple town council meetings. There were many opportunities. So if we had any kind of outreach, at any point prior to this getting put on the ballot, we would have changed it. But that didn't happen. So consequently, and you know, maybe that's on us, you know, for not reaching out. We knew some people wouldn't be happy about it. And maybe that's on us for not reaching out to them, but we didn't know that there was opposition. In fact, I had asked a couple of the council members who ended up being against it, including Ford. I said, "Are you aware of any organized opposition?" And this was literally, you know, just before we put it. No. Now, maybe he did or didn't. I don't know. But let's just say that it was. I felt that we were sort of ambushed, and that was sort of the most depressing part of this, honestly, to me, because I've known Jeff Crute for a long time. And I kind of succeeded him on the council. Had he reached out, you know,